Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room. I'm NBC's Devin Dwyer on this Friday. Great to have you with us today. A lot of news to get to today, starting with a big push on Capitol Hill now that the Mueller testimony is over to keep the pressure on President Trump. Today, House Democrats announced that they are keeping impeachment on the table, even as public support for that process is waning in this country. Today, party leaders announced that they will keep the spotlight on President Trump's behavior all summer long.
I'm not trying to run out the clock. We will proceed when we have what we need to proceed, not one day sooner. The decision will be made in a timely fashion. This isn't endless. And when we have the best, strongest possible case, and that's not endless either.
Some have argued that because Director Mueller was reluctant to testify and seemed older than some remembered him, his work is somehow diminished. It is not. We will continue to seek testimony from key fact witnesses. As many of you know, the committee has authorized several additional subpoenas. Our work will continue into the August recess, and we will use those subpoenas if we must.
And that was Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler today announcing a path forward. Ben Siegel, our Capitol Hill reporter, was here. Investigative reporter Catherine Falder's here as well. Catherine, let me start with you because Jerry Nadler, you were there, you questioned him, said the committee is going to pursue documents. They want interviews from some of the witnesses that were in the Mueller report. And today he also filed a lawsuit just a short time ago to keep the pressure on as they head into the summer.
Yeah, he filed what they're calling this application to the court. And what they're requesting specifically is grand jury information and all of that underlying evidence in Mueller's report. Now, they don't know what's in it. They kept saying, we don't know what we don't know, but they think that this can, as they're describing it, advise as to whether to pursue articles of impeachment. Now, it's unclear whether they will get their hands on this grand jury information, but of course, they've just written this big application to the court that's about 50 pages, making the argument that they need this for more information into their investigation into obstruction of justice.
And just to remind everybody, grand jury material is typically by law protected, kept confidential. It's the witnesses who came forward by Robert Mueller over the 2 years, gave testimony, talked about some of the things, for example, they witnessed President Trump doing, and that is typically kept private, but the Democrats want it to come out. Yeah,
and Ben can weigh in here a little bit too, but I think an important point here is we kept asking, what is it that you think you will see here, right? And what precedent does this set a dangerous precedent? And we know that the Department of Justice has been in an accommodation process with the committee. Now, they have allowed some members to come over and see other documents underlying the report. And what was interesting is in a background call with some of the lawyers today, they said that some of their members who went over to DOJ to see some of the information under the redacted portions that we haven't seen, they saw things that they believed were important enough for the American public to see and that they might be able to find out through the grand jury material.
And Ben, even as many people are saying this is case closed, certainly the White House wants to move on and turn the page. 13 million people saw Bob Mueller testify this week. House Democrats initially were sort of muted after his performance, but more of them now are actually joining the call for impeachment proceedings.
That's right. We've seen a slow but steady drumbeat of new Democrats coming on board of these calls. As of today, we have over 100 House Democrats. Sounds like a big number, triple figures, but that's still only about 4 in 10 House Democrats, about 20% of the entire House.
Is there a tipping point?
Yeah.
I mean, what number do we need to hit? So we see 100 here. What number do you need to hit to actually open impeachment
I think
proceedings?
It's not about who is for impeachment, but who isn't right now. Nancy Pelosi, she says her job is to defend her conference, defend the majority, make sure that she's protecting some of these members from moderate districts. If we see more moderate, some of these freshmen from areas that are traditionally Republican strongholds, if some of those members come out for impeachment in greater numbers, that could be a very good indicator that they might be going down that road.
And meanwhile, as the political fight continues, the Senate Intelligence Committee has just released its first installment of their bipartisan review into our election security with some pretty urgent warnings for states. Our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, has been covering that side of the story, Pierre, because amidst this political bickering, there's a very real and urgent threat opposed to the 2020 elections ahead?
You know, a lot of things have been made about Mueller's testimony, but the one thing that he was most resolute about is the fact that this is an ongoing threat from the Russians. He said they're doing it as we sit here. And the Senate Intelligence Report amplified that. I think one of the things that struck me about the report is this notion that the Russians, while they didn't change any data, and while they changed no votes, they were probing all 50 states.
Yeah, 50 states, this line in particular, Pierre, in our graphic here struck me. The report said that the Russians were in a position to delete or change data, at least in the state of Illinois. No indication they did that,
Right.
but they were poised to do it.
Right. They got access to hundreds of thousands of voter information files. Now, that creates the potential for great folly. And the fact that they were looking at vulnerabilities in all 50 states, a lot of intelligence officials are very concerned about what were they up to, what are they planning. Now, if you're like me and you've dealt with counterintelligence officials and people on the dark side of things, if you will, they'll tell you things like, what could you do with voter information? Well, if you have people in the United States, and we know the Russians from time to time have had people in the United States, you could mail things to these people like, oh, your voter registration is now expired. You cannot show up. Send that to people like a week before the election. And 10, 20,000 votes could be a huge difference. So yes, it's that creative, that clandestine, those types of things that they're concerned about.
And potentially on the cusp of doing again as we head into the next election.
Right, and it's not just Russians that they're concerned about. They're concerned about the capabilities of the Iranians, the Chinese, and others to impact the election. But clearly, Putin and the Russians, according to our intelligence officials, our law enforcement officials, they attacked the 2016 election, and they're primed to do it again if we don't improve the security. And you saw a dust-up yesterday as well about what to do about it.
That's a perfect segue, because Congress has passed $380 million already to beef up state election security systems. But House and Senate Democrats want to put forward even more money. They want to require states to use paper ballots. Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, wasn't having any of it. Here's what he said yesterday, blocking a measure on election security.
It's very important that we maintain the integrity and the security of our elections in our country. Any Washington involvement in that task needs to be undertaken with extreme care, and on a thoroughly bipartisan basis. Obviously, this legislation is not that. It's just a highly partisan bill from the same folks who spent 2 years hyping up a conspiracy theory about President Trump and Russia.
So no new legislation for now, but the fight continues. Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice Correspondent, thank you so much. Catherine Faulders, thanks for your reporting. Ben is going to stick around with us, but I do want to bring in our guest now, of someone who has a firsthand experience on state-level elections. Tammy Jones is the president of the Florida State Association of Supervisors of Elections. She's a Republican, and she has been intimately involved for over a decade in the administration of Florida's election process. Tammy, thanks so much for joining us. Your state's one of 14 that requires paper ballots in this country. Also, understand you're the first and only state to use a network monitoring service in all of your counties. Tell us about how that works, and have you detected any malicious activity since you implemented that system?
Well, that is correct. We are proud in Florida that all 67 counties plus the state has joined and have this monitoring system on our network. I just want to give you some statistics. Of 153 deployed nationwide of the Albert sensors, we are 68 of those. So we are 44% of the Albert sensors out there. Florida alone is leading the nation with securing our elections.
And tell me, what is an Albert sensor for folks who don't know the technology? What does that actually do?
This sensor actually detects any intrusion within your system. So it will notify you immediately. You'll get phone calls, you'll get emails, you'll get text messages, you'll get alerts galore if there's a problem with your system. And we've had this in place. Most counties had it in place for the 2018 elections. And we just wrapped up this year with a couple counties that joined and finalize the process of all counties being on board. So
how confident are you in Florida, you're sort of a leader on this, that the 2020 election will be completely secure? Are you feeling good about that?
I really do. I feel like Florida has made some initiatives to better prepare ourselves. Supervisors in Florida are staying laser focused on this issue. It has evolved since 2016 as far as the knowledge we have gained since the threat that we know is real. It's ever changing. We can never say for sure that things like this couldn't happen, but I can tell you one thing that we do in Florida. We have paper ballots. We can always go back and count those paper ballots. We have provisional ballots. So we have ballots. If someone were to come in, and let's say someone did tamper the database and voters' names were removed and they go in to vote, we offer every single person that comes in a ballot without being turned away. So we have things in Florida where, we're going to protect the vote, and we want voters to feel confident that we have done the things. The state of Florida has made improvements since 2016. It's something that we will never let our guard down. We're working with the state right now on a joint election security initiative. What that means is, we're actually analyzing our systems again, and we're working to ensure that there's no open holes or windows to any vulnerabilities. If there are, we're working to fix them, and everything will be in place and guarded by the 2020 presidential preference primary.
And that has been in large part due to an infusion of cash and investment. As you said, more than a dozen states don't have those paper ballots because they don't haven't at least invested the resources in that system. Real quickly before I let you go, we do have to move on, but I want to get your take what you thought yesterday as someone who oversees Florida's elections when you heard Bob Mueller say this week that the Russians are back at it right now. Did that worry you in any way?
It doesn't surprise me that these threats are every day. If you look around. Several county agencies, state agencies, not just in the election world, but all over the country, you hear of these things happening. So we can never let our guard down. In Florida, we have invested millions of dollars to put the infrastructure in place that's needed. Working with the state, I think, is an important key factor. We're doing tabletop exercises. So we're ensuring that we're trained and we're ready, not saying, we have things in place, to make sure that if something happens to our data. And remember, there's two different systems when you talk about voter registration and the tabulation system. And remember, I think the key thing to remember is the tabulation system in Florida is not hooked to the internet. It's not networked. So I think that's really important for people to know.
Yeah, a lot of states have not connected online, which is a key security component, which we did hear the Senate Intelligence Committee talk about as well. Tammy Jones, we're out of time, but thank you so much. Great to hear your perspective from the Florida state elections point of view. Tammy Jones, president of the Florida State Association of Supervisors of Elections. To Capitol Hill now on a major bipartisan compromise this week that will help keep the government running. Ben Siegel is back because he's been covering this. Ben, Republicans and Democrats are crowing about this budget deal, and they're declaring victory. The president's been tweeting about it, that this is good, bringing Democrats into it. It raises government spending by billions of dollars, but it's not necessarily good news if you're a millennial.
Right. Politically, for the moment, it's smart politics for Democrats and the Republicans. The president there might prevent a shutdown. But if you're a millennial, this is something that essentially kicks the can down the road. We're spending, adding more money to the national debt. It's not clear how that's going to be paid off. This wasn't fully paid for. So there was actually one congressman who tried to get the name of this bill changed to the Kick the Can Down the Road Act, a symbolic measure. But that was, of course, expressing frustration about what this is doing for future generations.
Yeah, future generations, the Pete Peterson Foundation, one of the government watchdogs that has been tracking all of this, offered us these numbers. Take a look at why the rising national debt will actually cost you if you're a millennial. The foundation says this, that by increasing the debt, it basically will increase interest rates for everybody. It will be more expensive to borrow money, and that in turn would mean if you're an average family of four, by 2027, you'll have $2,000 less in your annual income. By 2037, $8,000, 2047, $16,000. That is, if nothing is done about the skyrocketing national debt. So there's some real dollars and cents there. I don't know if our live guest has been able to join us. She's here with us now. Hillary Hillary Allen is actually leading a campaign right now of millennials across the country to get plugged in on the national debt. Hillary joins us now. Hillary, great to see you. You know, I got to be honest, the national debt's not really a sexy topic among most people. How do you sell it? How do you break through and get people to pay attention and care about this?
Yeah, well, you know, it's not easy, but from Washington, it might not seem like a sexy topic, but when you look at the facts and figures and the fact that in just 16 years, Social Security is going to become depleted for Generation Z and for the millennial generation, it starts to become very relevant and very sobering very quickly. So we look at those facts and figures. We're pulling data from the CBO. And there's definitely an appetite on college campuses across the country today to reach across the aisle and to work collaboratively and bipartisanly to start talking about this and to put pressure on our leaders in Washington so that we can start to have the conversation sooner rather than later.
And what do you think the answer is, like in a nutshell? What do you tell a 22-year-old who says, you know, what should I be telling my congressman to do about the national debt?
There's no silver bullet, and that's why our program Up to Us focuses so much on how to have a constructive dialogue and understanding the real implications of it, because what we have to do is we have to reduce the amount of suffering in the quickest way possible. And what I mean by suffering is, of course, the economic consequences. And the longer we wait, the bigger the consequences. So it's really a combination of the bipartisan support and that collaboration. And young people are really buying into that. You know, they see how polarized Washington politics is today, and they know what's at stake for them and their futures, and they want to change that.
Yeah, millennials for sure. I mean, Ben, the national debt tied to Social Security, tied to Medicare. A lot of younger people, are starting millennials in particular, as they start to move into middle age, looking at retirement, those sorts of things. And some of those benefits may disappear if Congress doesn't act now.
Absolutely. Questions about whether those will be around in 20 or 30 years, and also what gets done with other important national issues. You have infrastructure, you have healthcare, things that people need to spend money on and Congress has to make decisions on. Of course, that's all made much more difficult when you have the deficit to deal with, too.
Yeah, the debt and deficit, important matters. And, of course, the big picture here, the peg today is the fact that the Congress has now approved this budget deal for the next 2 years, but it raises spending, as Ben said, by several $100 billion, adding to that debt. Hillary Allen, thanks so much with the Up to Us campaign, joining us, National Campaign of Millennials, pushing for more attention on the debt. Out to Los Angeles now. Ben will stick around for this as well, for the first ever national summit of young political leaders with American mayors. The United States Conference of Mayors is hosting this event to empower 16 to 22-year-olds to get involved in the policy-making process, take on issues like the debt, and also heal our politics, starting with the local level. We're joined now by Joseph Tuma, who is one of the participants in the summit out in L.A. Joseph, great to see you. Joseph is a Duke University student, co-founder of the grassroots organization Bridge the Divide, which is, well, you tell us about it, Joseph. This is a group you founded to help young people of different political persuasions talk to each other.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for having me. Bridge the Divide, we started it about 3 years ago, and we work to facilitate conversations across party lines between young people. As you know, it's a very polarized time in our country, so we think it's really important to try to bring people together across these boundaries that we have and sort of just promote civility and a productive conversation, because we don't necessarily see that at the national level with our leaders anymore.
Yeah, we certainly don't. I wanted to ask you specifically, Joseph, about this controversy that's brewing right now on the campaign trail between these House Democrats that the president has singled out as the squad, and his campaign now embracing this idea of race as we head towards 2020 and the Send Her Back movement. Have you had conversations about that in your group and on your campus? How is that being processed? How do you bridge that divide, if you will?
Well, we actually haven't had any conversations specifically about that at this point, but I do think that it is indicative of just the greater polarization and that movement away from the center that we're seeing on both sides. So I hope that we can try to, push past those labels and identify, first and foremost, as Americans who all want the best for this country. It's just that we maybe see different ways of getting there. So we haven't had conversations specifically on that, but I think it's a great topic to talk about and try to process as young people.
Joseph Tuma of West Virginia, Duke University student, founder of Bridge the Divide, coming to us live from Los Angeles in the first ever Young People Conference with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Thanks so much, Joseph, for being on the show. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Speaking of bridging the divide, Ben, there was a little bit of that going on Capitol Hill today. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had a meeting with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Leader of the squad.
Leader of the squad.
Yeah.
Tell us what this was all about.
So this goes back a couple weeks. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and the squad, they were upset about an immigration border relief package for the migrant crisis at the border. They thought Pelosi cut a raw deal with the Senate, with Republicans, and were upset about it. There was some sniping on social media, some sniping in interviews, and this was an attempt to bury the hatchet, even though Pelosi later said today she didn't think there was a hatchet to bury.
She didn't, and here's what she said after meeting with AOC.
In our caucus, we have our differences. Respect that instead of making a big issue of it. We sat down today. We had a good meeting, and the Congresswoman is a very gracious member of Congress. So we had a very positive conversation about our districts and how we represent them, our country, and how we need to meet the needs, the diversity of America, and the challenges we face. It's like you're in a family. In a family, you have your differences, but you're still family. We just had a meeting to clear the air.
And they cleared the air, and then they sent out this tweet standing side by side. AOC said it was a positive meeting as well, so a little bit of a kumbaya moment, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was also a good meeting for Nancy Pelosi in that leaving Congress for 6 weeks of recess and gets to get this out of the way, sort of start over. They can come back with a fresh start later in the fall.
Later this fall. Yeah. Relations going in the opposite direction among Democrats out on the campaign trail, to say the least. Different. Sharper elbows being thrown ahead of the next debate. Ben will be covering that. The hatchets are out big time. And our two crack reporters have been following it on the trail. Molly Nagel, she covers Joe Biden, and Kirsten Gillibrand. She's on the road right now. Lizette Rodriguez joins us from Los Angeles as well. She's covering Bernie Sanders and Cory Booker. Guys, great to see you. Let's start with you, Molly, because the polling front runner is heading into this next debate. He's already talking about how he's going to be quite a bit tougher on some of his opponents on stage. He's on the second night.
That's right. He's not going to be as polite as the first debate that he was a part of. Joe Biden at a fundraiser talked about how he's not going to be afraid to hit back at some of his opponents like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris if they do go after him when he's standing shoulder to shoulder with them on Wednesday night when they take the debate stage. He's gotten into fights with both of them over his criminal justice history. Both have criticized him for different issues in the past, including busing, and Cory Booker on criticizing Joe Biden for his role in the 1994 crime bill.
Yeah,
so Joe Biden clearly making it known that he's not going to have an issue.
Yeah, if that first debate highlighted, basically the theme of the first debate was Kamala Harris attacking Joe Biden on issues of race and busing. It's sounding like the second debate is going to be a gang-up attack on Joe Biden over criminal justice reform and mass incarcerations. Here's Cory Booker just a few days ago and how Joe Biden responded.
Let me tell you right now, it is easy to call Donald Trump a racist now. You get no badge of courage for that. The question is, what were you doing to address structural inequality and institutional racism throughout your life? Don't just tell us what you're gonna do, tell us what you've already done. Don't just tell us you're gonna be a champion for our communities when you become president if you haven't been a champion already.
Mr. Vice President, Cory Booker has called you the architect of mass incarceration. What do you think of that?
Cory knows that's not true, number one. Number two, you know, the significant part of the incarceration that occurred before the crime bill was written, number one. Number two, if you look at the mayor's record in Newark, One of the provisions I wrote in the crime bill, a pattern and practice of misbehavior, his police department was stopping and frisking people, mostly African-American men.
So Ben, very interesting there, because it does seem that this is, again, this major play for the African-American vote. Joe Biden has traditionally had a pretty robust support from that community, but you've got Kamala Harris and now Cory Booker trying to pick that away.
Sure, this has been his strength for a very long time, but now you have, as you said, these other candidates who their path to victory relies on that group too, so you're going to see them, as they've already started to become much more aggressive.
Highlighting criminal justice reform policy, busing policy, other things on that front. Lizette Rodriguez, let's bring you into this as well, because there's also now some line of attack opening up, coming into public from Kirsten Gillibrand, who struggled in her candidacy. She's now issuing some veiled threats against her rivals. Just yesterday said that she thinks there's some Democratic candidates running who don't believe it's a good idea for women to work outside the home, and she said there are some who think the Me Too movement has gone too far. You've been talking to her campaign. Who's she talking about?
You know, we still really don't know where those comments are coming from, but what we did hear from the Cory Booker campaign, those comments that he made while at the National Urban League Conference in Indianapolis, his campaign tells us that the comments weren't a veiled swipe at Biden. They're saying that the speech was written on Monday before Biden released his policy proposal for crime reform, and they're saying that this is more so a veiled attack towards the entire Democratic presidential field.
They're not getting specific just yet. Real quickly, Lizette, you're also covering Bernie Sanders. He's planning to come into this next debate on Tuesday and Wednesday. Much sharper elbows on health care as well.
Yes, yesterday while he was holding a town hall in downtown Los Angeles, someone in the audience asked him, you know, what's going to happen to all of the people who want to stay on their private insurance? What happens when they go on to Medicare for All? Bernie said it's not that people like their private insurance, they like their doctors. And he also added that his opponents are spending a lot of money and a lot of time trying to dismiss the benefits that he says live in Medicare for All.
Yeah, he was tying Joe Biden there to Donald Trump at one point as well in the Republican Party and the insurance industry. So it's certainly going to be a lively debate. Tuesday, Wednesday in Detroit. Lizette, the whole team will be there. Molly Nagel as well. Thank you both very much. Ben Siegel at our fact check desk. Finally today, before we push off, I want to show you something that caught our eye. If you haven't already seen this online, it's generated a lot of buzz. President Trump standing before this unusual presidential seal at an event with young conservatives this week. On the left is the official presidential seal. On the right is the one that was on the screen behind him. If you look closely, those are golf clubs being held there by the eagle. But then look even closer, and it's a two-winged eagle with two heads. Looks a lot like the Russian Federation coat of arms on the left. Turns out there was a goof-up, and whichever seal they used has a Russian influence to it. So there you go. Hope you have a great weekend. I'm Devin Dwyer here in Washington. Thanks for watching The Briefing Room. See you back here on Monday at 3:30.